The Global Compact for Migration will be signed in Marrakesh tomorrow. If you want to sign the petition against it, the link is in the description. You can sign at the top, or you can scroll down to the bottom, see how many signatures we've gotten. We've crossed 51,000, which is wonderful, and you can sign at the bottom there. Don't forget to click the link in the email. Your signature won't count unless you click the link. I hate censorship, and I hate conversations being stifled on forums or on comment sections and news articles, and even Reddit these days. If you say something wrong, you'll get banned from the subreddit. It's insane. So that's why I started a forum. Come share a link. Tell us what you think about it. We'll talk. We'll join the conversation with you, or come and join the conversation with us. It'd be lovely to have you. So on to our stories today. The Toronto Sun is talking about the Global Compact for Migration. And a lot of the mainstream media, the CBCs and CTVs, the people taking the $500 million the Trudeau government's allocated to media, they're reporting that this is nothing to see here, no problems. And I'm going to show you that there is a really, really big problem. There's a big problem with Justin Trudeau. There's a big problem with his prime ministership. He's a terrible prime minister. There's a big problem with the fact that our RCMP are being used as bellhops for wheelie luggage with visa-laden fake refugees. I mean, this is a big problem. Why is our immigration system being made a fool of? Oh, because of the Global Compact on Migration. It has nothing to do with the loophole in the Safe Third Country Agreement. This is the plan all along. The plan was to just open our borders to anybody who wants to come, which is crazy. Okay, so this is a Toronto Sun report. Gunter's saying, here is why the Global Compact for Migration is a problem. The danger of the Global Compact for Migration, which international delegates will sign next week in Marrakesh, Morocco, is not that it will enable some clandestine international bureaucracy or judiciary to dictate immigration policy over the objections of sovereign states. It's that it will enable, quote, progressives within each nation's government to liberalize domestic refugee and immigration laws using the excuse that, quote, the UN made us do it. The United Nations has no real ability to force any of its treaties. According to conventions or compacts or individual nations, there are no black helicopters of conspiracy fame. Outside of the Western world, countries sign UN agreements all the time and then promptly ignore them. The UN could decree tomorrow that no country, Canada included, could deny entry by any foreigner on any grounds, and Canada could ignore that edict, as long as Ottawa had the courage to withstand criticism from the forces of political correctness. There has been a 20% rise in refugees and migrants around the world in the past 5 years, 277 million last year, up from 232 million in 2013. And this is me now, just quick aside. I really dislike the fact that we're using refugees and migrants together. I'd rather have numbers for one, the other, not both. And saying that refugees are migrants, it's not that clear cut, I don't think. There's different distinctions, and the news and the media and politicians and the UN have been guilty in the last couple of years of purposely conflating and confusing these words, and it is driving me crazy. It bothers me no end, because this is hijacking of language. This is Orwellian, and it is incredible that we're watching it in real time and people are just accepting it. Like, illegal to irregular has happened, and the media does not question it because the government is paying them. The government is giving them money and says, yeah, you'll follow our party line. Illegal, not irregular. Migrants, not refugees. Refugees are different. Migrants are different. There's different impetus. There's different amounts. There are different things. Okay, back to the article. The Global Compact claims all it wishes to do is, quote, foster international cooperation among all relevant actors on migration, while uploading, quote, the sovereignty of states. It claims to merely be a symbolic agreement on how future international cooperation on migration might work. Details to follow later. But that's the sneaky part of the UN process. Delegates from member states agree to these motherhood declarations, which they reassure opponents are largely meaningless. Then they get busy fleshing out the real rules and inserting them into their own nation's laws, all the while insisting they have to because of a UN treaty. And I'll leave it there, but he fleshes it out pretty well. That's the game. That's the game. No, it's nothing to worry about. And then the judge that you've, like the really lefty liberal judge, the guy who gave Kadar his $10 million, or the same person who declared Doug Ford's declaration that the municipal election will follow the same lines as the provincial and federal, he said that was unconstitutional because of free speech, which is just like patently ridiculous. So they let these activist judges then run with these UN declarations, and boom, it's backdooring a policy through law. They're weaponizing our own legal system against us. Don't believe me? Here, I'll prove it. Okay, so this is Thinkprogress, and it says, no, the Paris Climate Agreement isn't binding. Here's why that doesn't matter. And it says the Paris climate deal has been lauded as historic, sweeping, and ambitious, a way to lead the world into a post-fossil fuel, less than 2 degrees Celsius warming future, but it also has been ridiculed for being non-binding. That is to say that America and nearly 200 other countries all got together and agreed to try really, really hard to slow climate change and to submit ongoing progress reports, but didn't set up penalties within the agreement. Non-binding, though, doesn't mean meaningless. It's worth taking a moment and thinking about what a binding agreement is. If I offer to pick up your child from daycare Thursday afternoon, is that a binding agreement? You can't, strictly speaking, punish me if I leave Sarah sitting on the curb, but, and this is a big but, you can shame me, you can avoid me, distrust me, and not make any more social agreements with me. The idea of a social pressure and participation does not apply to carpools. It also applies to the international community. Sure, China could renege on its promise to transition off coal. The United States could decide it's not going to give any money to developing nations to help build renewable energy, but that would make for pretty bad foreign relations. Would it? Okay. And interesting to note, this is an old article. China is building, I think, 700 coal plants currently, and they're not slowing down at all. And the United States, they give quite a lot to developing nations, but not to build renewable energy. And as Mr. Trump pulled them out of the Paris Climate Agreement, they're not giving it to renewable energy. So this article is talking about how this non-binding agreement is pretty binding. Is if you don't do this, we're going to ostracize you from the international community. We're going to shame you. We're going to not deal with you, right? And at this point in time, as Mr. Trump, and there's a bunch of other people who are pulling out of the Global Compact on Migration, that may not be such a big deal, except for the fact that Canada are the architects of this terrible, awful deal. And speaking of the non-binding climate deal, here's an article from May 17th, 2017 that says, Liberals provide details of plan for national carbon tax. So this non-binding UN agreement, the Paris Climate Agreement, has resulted in a carbon tax that is being shoved down the throats of the population of Canada, despite wide outrage and legal battles across the provinces. Link is in the description if you want to read this for yourself, but there's a couple of things I wanted to highlight. The 26-page document released today outlines in detail how a federal carbon tax would be implemented, including how the levy would be applied to fossil fuels such as gasoline, diesel, and natural gas starting in 2018. So this was in 2017, and it's been the implementation has been forestalled, but it's not happening the way they thought it was going to, and because the agreements all fell apart. But here's the other part I wanted to highlight. Quote, Ottawa and most of the provinces and territories reached a framework deal last December on cutting greenhouse gases to meet Canada's Paris Climate Accord commitments. The possibility of a federal carbon tax for provinces that didn't implement their own plan was part of that agreement. The federal Liberals were under pressure to have a plan to lower greenhouse gas emissions before it approved more pipelines to carry crude to market. So this was 2017. We still haven't had one pipeline built. We're still buying Saudi crude. Forget Energy East. Forget Trans Mountain. We do not have enough lowered greenhouse gas emissions to build any more pipelines, right? Right, federal government? So maybe that's why we're not doing anything. But this Paris Climate Accord, this non-binding Paris Climate Accord, seems to have absolutely decimated our economy. And I'm worried, and I believe rightly so, that the Global Compact will absolutely overwhelm our healthcare, our education, and all of the other systems that make Canada so great. So why are we allowing our government to sign it? Call your MP. They're signing tomorrow. I don't know. I'm doing everything I can do. And then here's just one more. Ontario. This is outlining Ontario's plan against the carbon tax. But this non-binding agreement has real world consequences. And here's Wikipedia talking about how the Paris Agreement is non-legally binding. Paradise Papers. If you don't know what the Paradise Papers are, look into it. Mr. Morneau is listed on them. Here's a news article from Ontario that I saw, but it's a federal one. Mandatory drunk driving tests hitting the roads before the holidays. If you choose to get behind the wheel after drinking, you will be caught under incoming federal impaired driving rules, the ministers responsible are cautioning. This direct warning comes in light of new drunk driving rules coming into force in 2 weeks during peak holiday season. The likelihood of getting caught is about to increase exponentially, Border Security and Organized Crime Reduction Minister Bill Blair told reporters on Parliament Hill Tuesday. A slate of changes specific to alcohol impairment were passed in June as part of Bill C-46, the drug-impaired driving bill that coincides with the new law legalizing cannabis. The legislation amended Canada's impaired driving laws to allow police officers to conduct mandatory roadside alcohol breath tests on drivers they pull over without requiring a suspicion that the person has been drinking. You see that? Your rights are being taken away because they legalized marijuana and passed a bad law, and the bad law is Bill C-46. And that bad law has many, many, many bad facets, including a blood alcohol level of THC that if you pass it, you are automatically deemed impaired, and they can throw the book at you. Like if you drive over 80, right, over 0.80 ppm or alcohol in your blood, then you can lose your license and all that. Same with if they take a blood test and your THC level is a certain level, they don't have to prove impairment. They can just charge you with that level of impaired if you were driving. And the problem with that is THC builds up in your system. If you were a medical patient, and medical patients are exempt from that, but if you were maybe self-medicating, let's say, then you would blow right over. And even if you weren't smoking marijuana that day, you would still have a very high THC level in your system. So what I'm telling you is you can get pulled over and breathalyzed without the suspicion that you had been drinking under new laws. Unbelievable. Our rights being eroded by this liberal government further. And finally, the Global Compact on Migration was protest in Ottawa, and this was a banner that we saw, well, not me, on Twitter. It says, amazing banner at anti-UNC Compact rally, the UN Compact, Reject Migration Pact at Justin Trudeau, can you hear us? And the banner says, Reject Migration Pact. And this one, this one is about France, so I'll show you that in a second. Okay, well, I'll show you that now. This was just a French protester in a red, like, this guy's dangerous. There's 4 cops there. Why are they tackling him? Really? You need to do that? This is what an emboldened police force, a militarized police force, can do to an old man who's trying to patriotically save his country. And I mean, I don't know this guy. I'm projecting here, but this doesn't look very fair to me, right? A whole lineup of cops, and this guy's got a beanie on. Like, really? And this is what I wanted to finish on. Patriots rally in front of Canada's Parliament to protest the UN Migration Compact and protect our country's border and sovereignty. Protesters chant, "No Trudeau, he's got to go." Retreat. You don't see this on the fake news.
Bonjour à tous, comment ça va? Chers citoyens canadiens et québécois, très fiers d'être ici dans le pouvoir. À moins 15, moins 20 degrés, 15, minus 15, minus 20. I'm very proud to be.
So yeah, minus 15, minus 20, and that was the protest on Parliament Hill. Canadians are angry. Don't let the media tell you different. And this is something to be angry about. This is going to fundamentally change Canada. This is the pathway to unelected bureaucrats controlling everything from our climate policy and new taxes to immigration policy. It's terrifying. Thanks for watching, everybody.